Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight, Simon is back with us. Our guest is Risa Simon, consultant, best coach, kidney patient advocate, including book for children. Kidney, her big wish for mom comes true. As you recall from our first two broadcasts with Risa, she's a preemptive kidney transplant recipient, an unstoppable patient advocate and mentor, a published author, and creator of Transplant Strong's powerful new app, the Donor Seeker app. She's also the president of Simon Says Seminars, Inc. and Transplant First Academy. She's undertaken great strides to pay back the community with her intense desire to empower kidney patients to live their best possible life. The link to the first two broadcasts is in the comments to this broadcast, and I put all my research in there from all three broadcasts. So if you go to my personal Facebook page, at the top of the page is the broadcast. In the comments, anything you wanted to know about Risa and were afraid to ask, it's there. So tonight, we're here to talk to our guest about her new book, Sydney's Kidney Adventure. Her big wish for mom comes true. Let me show you that. There's the book. And just so you know, I got my own copy in today. Can you guys see that? I hope so.
Yep. Yep.
All right, good. So here's how the four-time author describes her new book. Quote, I am pleased to announce that the release of my new children's book on living kidney donation under the title of Sydney's Kidney Adventure, Her Big Wish for Mom Comes True, is an uplifting tale of a child's enduring treasure, hunt for a living kidney donor to end her mother's wait for a kidney transplant that will touch the hearts of kids and parents alike. You can watch our 1-minute cinematic book trailer here, and then it lists the link, and the link is now streaming across your screen. This captivating children's book is not just a story, it's a life lesson in the incredible power of family love, and has been described as, quote, a children's book that naturally inspires adult readers to explore living donation for themselves or someone in need, unquote. The book offers parents a way to ease into conversations about a loved one's need for a kidney transplant and their search for a living kidney donor, not only with adults, but also with children. It was written to motivate waitlisted kidney patients and their families and friends to talk up their loved one's need for a living kidney donor. If you're inspired to grab a copy, I'd be over the moon if you shared your thoughts with me or in an Amazon review, which I'm going to do over the weekend, Miss Risa. And here is the link to purchase the book on Amazon. So, you know, if you're interested after the broadcast, please go check it out. In the meantime, please give a warm welcome to our friend and friend of the show, the great Risa Simon is here with us tonight. How are you, Risa?
I'm doing great, Jim, and thank you so much. You are so kind. It is a real special treat to be back on your show. Thank you for the invite, and happy to be here and hopefully inspire a few listeners.
Oh, I'm happy to see you, Risa, anytime. Let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about your kidney story. When you were diagnosed, what you were diagnosed, and your issues obtaining a kidney transplant through 5 potential living donors.
Yeah. Gosh, we go back in time, roll the tape back, is almost 45 years ago when I was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease. I know you're very familiar. We're in the same camp here. It's the same disease that took my father's life in his early 40s, took my grandmother's life before I was born, and impacted, even though there's supposed to be a 50% chance of passing it down to your children, both my brother and I were both diagnosed with PKD. So we were both impacted by this genetic disease. And, once you're diagnosed with a condition that you've lost a family member to, and Jim, I know you know this all too well, it really hits home in a way that you never imagined, because I think those generations before us, we know so much more now and we can do so much more now, but to get that diagnosis after you've experienced other family members suffer and perhaps lose the battle during that suffering, you would think the first time you hear you've got the same disease, you think, okay, well, that's going to be the path that I'll be living here. I was diagnosed in my 20s. And in fact, my father was diagnosed in the Navy, and he was told at age 20 something, early 20s, that he had 20 years more to live. And that was all they could tell him. Fortunately, I think when you and I were diagnosed, we know that we had a few more options. But you and I also both know that, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, that if we didn't do the advocacy work that we do right now, if we didn't take deep dives into research and what's available for kidney patients to be more proactive, we wouldn't be where we are today. So that was an interesting process. And for me, I tended to, I went from fear to denial to my Pollyanna glasses, saying, I'm a healthy person. This isn't going to hit me. I'll be one of those individuals that have the PKD gene too, and I'll die of natural causes. And it won't be from PKD. But unfortunately, that was not the reality. So, the whole path for me that triggered this awareness and realization that I couldn't live in fear and denial. I had to pretty much grab myself by my collar and just kind of look in the mirror and say, you can change this path if you do something about it. And that's what I ended up doing.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about your experiences with trying to find a kidney donor, because I know you went through 5 potential living donors before you found your 6th. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Correct. Yeah, I absolutely can talk about that, but I probably missed a piece of the puzzle there to jump to donors, to tell you that I didn't even know I could have an option of having a living donor. So if you'll allow me, I want to give a lot of credit to the PKD Foundation, because back in 2008, I attended a conference, and that's where I first heard about living kidney donation. And that's where I first heard about preemptive transplantation. And I had been sleepwalking my way to dialysis. So I'm really glad that I went to that convention, because it was life-changing for me. But once I discovered this whole new reality, I started working a plan, hoping to attract some potential donors. Not an easy task, as you well know, Jim. But what bothered me the most is that I didn't get this information from my nephrologist's office. So yes, I ended up with 6 donors, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them. But the 6th one, over a period of 2 years, is what it took for me, and I was actively engaged. Now, back then, I didn't know what I know now and what I teach and inspire others to do on their empowerment path. But I did a pretty darn good job for someone who didn't really know So many people talk about living kidney donation and the path of sharing your story today. But when you and I were in need, this was sort of foreign. And so it wasn't as easy for us to find our way. The whole idea of being ahead of the eight ball and being able to avoid, for me, I was able to avoid dialysis. And that was a huge blessing in and of itself. But I could only do that with a living kidney donor because of the weight.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about your discovery of the possibility of a preemptive kidney transplant. When did you find out, and what steps did you take in order to obtain that?
Well, as I mentioned, Shirley didn't come from the sacred walls of that exam room with my nephrologist. So I harkened back to that conference where I didn't even know what the definition of preemptive was. I didn't understand any of that. And when I came back from that conference and told my nephrologist, I've got a new plan. I tried to be very diplomatic. I didn't want to step on any toes, like the patient that does all this research and Google searching and comes back and tells the doctor how they should treat you. So I was very careful about that. But in the same respect, I wanted to make sure I was heard. And when I had shared with my nephrologist, hey, I discovered this new thing called, not new, but new to me, called preemptive transplantation. And my new goal is to bypass dialysis. I think he looked at me as if I was from another planet. Unfortunately, back then, more so than now, but still exists, nephrologists are thinking, oh, you're way ahead of what you need to be thinking about here. You got to wait to get sicker. And let's talk dialysis, because a lot of the education to patients was all about the different types of dialysis and vein mapping and all that kind of stuff. So it was a little discouraging, to say the least, but I was deeply, deeply troubled, Jim, that there wasn't any encouragement. We should be getting that. We trust our physicians. We should be getting that from the people that are caring for us. And for me to have to go to a conference, and thank God there was a conference and there was a speaker. There was a transplant surgeon. There was, I believe, a living kidney donor. There was a recipient. And without that experience, I don't know, in the physician's defense, how much time do they have to talk to us patients? They've got this full schedule, patients down the hall, patients out in the reception area, and they're just looking at labs and going from patient to patient. So I'm talking about, to him, pie in the sky, but to me, my new goal, my golden nugget. So once I figured this out on my own, and I realized it really wasn't heard, I had to step up my own self-advocacy. I had to say, all right, well, he's not going to be fighting for me. And so I guess I have to fight for myself. And I think a lot of patients need to come. We can't do it without our physicians, but we have to know that we have a huge responsibility in this process. We have to really want that end game goal, and we have to fight for it. And that's what self-advocacy is all about.
Right, right. Just so our audience knows, you are your own best advocate. And a preemptive transplant is a transplant from a living donor before dialysis, hopefully in lieu of dialysis, just so everybody's on the same page. What were your health issues at that time?
They really weren't bad, Jim. It was mostly blood pressure issues. Another silly decision that I had made, just, uninformed. I was like, oh, I don't want to be on blood pressure medications. And I put it off for a while. And I'm sorry that I did, because I know that could have slowed the progression of our disease. So it was really more of a blood pressure issue. But as the disease progressed, I noticed I had a little bit of fuzzy thinking, because I was doing a lot of presentations. I was in the dental profession, and I was doing presentations in front of fairly large audiences. I was traveling the country, going into dental practices and helping them with organization and efficiency. And there were times that I was finding myself not as sharp as I had been. And I was like, gosh, I'm not that old. I shouldn't be skipping a word here and there. I was like, I need to buy a vowel, if you will. So those are the types of things, and being a little more fatigued. But it wasn't, when I compare my path to the majority of my nephrologists' patient base, I was like so healthy. He didn't really need to worry about me. And I wanted him not to necessarily worry about me. I wanted him to care about my goal and help facilitate that, or at least support and encourage it. And that's the sadness, and to me, somewhat of a shame that my medical partner wasn't able to do that. So sometimes we have to lean on other patients, conferences. I mean, I spent a fair amount of time talking to other patients that had walked this path before me. How did you do this? How did you do that? How did you find your donor? And you asked me about the donors. The first 5 donors, and it was almost 2 years before I got my transplant. But the first 5, if I give you sort of a profile, started with a vitamin store clerk, and then it went on to a couple dental colleagues, and then it was a stranger who had watched. Fortunately, since I was involved with the walk in Phoenix for the PKD Foundation, they were interviewing a few of us that were working and kind of organizing the walk, and so my story got out there that I needed a donor. And this one stranger who happened to be working at a dental school that I was consulting with, who didn't know me, stepped up, and she tried to get through twice. And so far, everybody's been disqualified. And then the 5th one was a police detective who found that same news reporting, but it was archived online, and she had contacted me and said she wanted to be my donor, and I was just thinking, oh, this is it, I'm sure it's it. She was so just determined that this is something she wanted to do. And I think we've read through the years that firemen, policemen, all those great people that serve the community, they're like fabulous donors because they're there for all the right reasons. But evidently, I'm just assuming she got a pretty important case because she didn't show up for testing. And it was all meant to be. Jim, I always think all these little hiccups and challenges, they're all blessings in disguise, because fortunately she didn't show to testing. I would hate for her not to show to surgery day. And then my Goldilocks donor appeared. That was my 6th, my just right Goldilocks donor. And yeah, I just I'll never forget how the offer came to be. This is a person who is a transplant administrator, and she heard my story, and actually I requested a meeting with someone higher up because I was noticing some things happening with potential donors calling the center, and I thought it's my responsibility not to complain and pound my hand on the table, but just to approach someone higher up on the food chain and say, help me understand, is this the way this is supposed to work? Because I've had donors call the center and be told they're not needed. It's like, do you know what it took for me to get that person to call the center? So this gal met with me, we felt like kindred spirits. And as it turns out, about 6 months later, we didn't know that the HLA matching would show us to have a sibling-like match. Yeah, she wanted to not only talk the talk, but walk the talk, and she wanted to go through her own transplant center, her own department, to see what it was like to be a living kidney donor and how efficient or inefficient it was, and make sure that she tightened all the bolts. And it's an amazing story.
Wow. Exactly where did this transplant take place?
Well, this is Mayo Clinic, Phoenix, Arizona.
In Phoenix, okay. And approximately when were you transplanted?
2010. And so 2 Saturdays ago, we just celebrated our 14th year kidneyversary.
Awesome. How has your
Yeah,
health been post-transplant?
it's been very good. And like I said, it wasn't horrible before transplant because most patients don't get the memo. And, it just like Jim, I remember talking to you, nobody was talking to you about transplant. And if you're not advocating and getting encouragement to do this, you're probably ending up on dialysis first, and then less time on dialysis, the longer and better the outcomes. So being preemptive, no dialysis. I was actually GFR 19 day of transplant, and I had a double nephrectomy, and it was all in the same day. So, I've lost track of the number of blessings, but they are with me and they are loud and clear. It's I do I do really give a lot of credit to my health, to having a living kidney donor, not being on dialysis prior, but also to our commitment. And I know you get this, Jim. Our commitment to keep ourselves healthy and protect the gift that we received. It's all about protecting that gift. Yes, it's protecting us,
Absolutely.
but it's protecting the gift. And so we can't just, haphazardly go, oh, I've got a transplant. And, we also don't have a crystal ball of how long our transplant's going to last. So it's up to us to do the due diligence, to get those labs drawn, to pay attention to the things that we need to do, obviously, to take our immunosuppressive medications, probably one of the most important.
There's some of mine.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. What would we do without them? There's times we go, oh, these darn immunosuppressive medications that lower our immune system and we can get all these infections and diseases. And yet, without them, our bodies probably would just say, what is that? That doesn't belong here.
Yeah, right.
Whoa,
It's a rejection, no question.
don't want that R word in our life.
No, 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 no. And just so folks understand, by law, when a doctor talks to you about your options in any kind of medical procedure, that's known as informed consent. And one of the things that kidney advocates, I don't care what group you belong to, push for in terms of informed consent is that we get complete advice on our options. And that includes preemptive kidney transplant before dialysis. They go over all your modalities for dialysis in center, dialysis at home, peritoneal dialysis, home hemodialysis, all that sort of thing. But they're not always real big on discussing preemptive transplants. So I recommend to my friends and my audience out there, if you're in that situation where your GFR is around 20 and it's starting to look like, you're going to have to make some choices, you should always, always, always talk to your nephrologist about preemptive kidney transplant. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
Well, let me add one thing to that, Jim. No, it was a very good soapbox, but I also like to remind your listeners that there are a number of transplant centers that you can self-refer because, I asked for the referral and he said no. Then I asked for the referral again and he was like, you're not ready yet. Then I found an article from PKD Foundation that stated 25 GFR is kind of a good number for PKD patients to be evaluated. And
Yeah.
so I scanned it and gave it to me. All right, I'll send it in. Then I checked a month later because I kept calling Mayo and they're like, we don't have a referral for you. Called the office. Sure enough, it hadn't been sent. So then I had to. So you have to, this self-advocacy that we're talking about, we don't sit back and go, oh yeah, my doctor's going to take care of that for me. We can't assume any of that. Our lives are at stake here. So I just want to underscore what you said. It's very important.
Absolutely. Very good. Very good. There'll be a new Uncle Jim on Monday. Forgetting important stuff. Let's
No,
talk
you have.
about let's talk about your new fast tracked mobile app, Donor Seeker. Why did you feel compelled to create a mobile app on this topic? And scrolling along now, folks, there's the link where you can find it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for bringing that up. Yeah, the Donor Seeker app, it's a mobile app, obviously, being that it's a mobile app, can be on iOS, Apple, or Android. And the reason I created a mobile app was because you and I and a lot of organizations and individuals are helping people find living kidney donors. But a lot of, especially the organizations, they will put on, whether it be a webinar or a live class. And I find the time dedication Not that the classes are not good, but the time dedication to those classes could be a deterrent for individuals that need this information now. I mean, the clock is ticking and every day counts. And so I wanted to do something that would be succinct. It would be a package. And in this particular program, we have a series of 4 videos, and you can watch all 4 videos in less than 15 minutes. So it's a 15-minute commitment to learn a little bit more about, hey, how do I bring up this subject? And how do I talk about living kidney donation or my need for a transplant? And how do I get other people to help me spread the word? How do I get reposts of my posts? And how can I involve individuals in a social environment? And how, when I'm in passing or talking to somebody, you know, the elevator speech, if you will, how do I get that done quickly? For example, in the Donor Seeker app, we talk about having a way to actually hand something off to someone, maybe a little card that says a little bit more about your transplant center and information that they can contact you or the transplant center. How do we put that all together and stir it in a pot and make it work for people that, especially people that are not well, that don't have energy, or possibly already on dialysis and hoping to get off of it someday soon? You know, there may be the people like we look at, for example, I was very proactive, so I really wasn't all that sick, so I could go to a conference, or, you know, I can go to these, but there are, it's tough, and you can't just get it all from going to one class. So I thought, here's something that you could be in the waiting room of your nephrology office or wherever. You could be waiting in line at the market, and you could be checking some of the resources or watching a video again. Oh yeah, I got to remember, that's how I say it. I also wanted to give individuals that could benefit from a living kidney donor transplant permission to engage, and engage in a way that wasn't as scary, that wasn't as awkward, that wasn't so off-putting. So what we did is we underscored and emphasized that you do not need to, in fact, we suggest they don't ever ask anybody for a kidney directly. The whole idea, the whole concept is to educate and inspire. And your listeners would take that information, hopefully ask more questions so you can unpack more, or not. If you're sensing they're not really interested, you may have to change the stories. You know, some will, some won't. Next. But to be able to do this and feel like, okay, this is how I'm supposed to do it. We script things. We give them examples of how to communicate, whether it's written or face to face, or whether it's posted online. They need these tips, and they need to have it in their pocket. So I wanted it to be like an all-in-one coach in an app, so that they can share it with their friends and encourage that team building process to help them get to their goal.
Okay. And I just want to remind everybody, there's a cinematic trailer for the Donor Seeker app, and the link is scrolling across your screen as we speak. And by the way, if this goes by too fast, remember, you can go to the comments on the original broadcast on my Facebook page. It's pinned right to the top, and all of this information is in there. Let's talk a little bit, Risa, about uh, Apple or Android and downloading and how much the app costs and all that sort of thing.
Well, I've got great news for you. It's free. So, and even on the Transplant Strong site, you can see the QR codes if it's just easier for you to do that, to download the app. So it is free. I failed to mention that the videos are in English and in Spanish, so that we could expand our audience. Yeah, it's as simple as getting into your app store, and all you have to do is search Donor Seeker, and it'll pop up.
Excellent. Excellent. Please talk to us a little bit about some of your experiences, as I think you've written 5 books now, prior to your writing of your most recent book. talk to us a little bit about some of the other books.
Sure, sure. Um, I started publishing books back when I was in dentistry. And the first two books were Team First, and second one was All the Right Moves. I was involved with efficiency and team building. Ergonomics was All the Right Moves. So I found, Jim, that I was presenting seminars at conventions, and I was going into offices and teaching skills. But I would leave, and the audience would leave. And once again, I wanted them to have something that, besides their notes or the handout from the session, that would either unpack it a bit deeper or just refresh their memory in terms of what they learned from the class. So those are the two books. I had done some manuals and stuff before, but those are the two books that I started with. And then once I jumped ship from dentistry because of my own personal medical journey, I just said, okay, this is good. This stuff I was doing was good over here, but I have a higher purpose over here. And when I recognized that for someone of my education and experience, where I'd go into dental offices and teach these dentists and their teams how to communicate with their patients and show compassion and emotional intelligence, and gee, what's that, right? And then I noticed it was missing in our nephrology group practices. I thought, okay, the universe has called me to take those skills and bring it into the renal community. And I didn't really know much about the community. And I continue to learn. Listen, we are students of life, right? But I thought, okay, I published a couple books in that industry. And now what am I doing? And what have I built? And what am I creating that I can pass on to individuals so they could leave or even expand on an article, leave a seminar, leave a webinar, or just be online and go, I want more. And maybe they're interested in mentoring, maybe they're interested in coaching, because that's available as well. But it's like, hey, maybe I could just get a book and read it at my own speed. Also, the reason why I did the app, though, I talk to people these days, colleagues even, they're like, Risa, do you know the last time I read a book? A lot of people aren't reading books because they're on their phones, they're on their devices. So fortunately, the books are Kindle and there is Audible. So we do offer that, and which is good. But I just wanted to offer something that lasted beyond the talk, beyond the consultation. And then, of course, I did Shift Your Fate, which was my first book in the renal community, which really just wanted individuals to have a guide for just creating a path forward to know the difference between dialysis and transplant. That's one thing that I still think is lacking. The healthcare professionals have a duty to offer us the best possible care. At the day of diagnosis, really, we don't know how the disease continuum is going to pan out here. But let me tell you, don't feel just because your dad died in his early 40s that you're going to die. Here, we will be monitoring you. And if you get to a point where you have renal insufficiency, we'll be talking about a couple options. But just so you know up front, the best option is to get a transplant before you need dialysis. We'll continue to talk about this throughout the years, but this is what needs to happen early on, so the patient's ready and receptive, and maybe even got a clan behind them saying, when you're ready, I'm here for you. So that the whole process of planting those seeds, and then the second to last book was In Pursuit of a Better Life, the ultimate guide for finding living kidney donors. Once again, wanted to put that content and the tools inside a book, which is the complementary book for the app Donor Seeker. So those were the first four, and then the new book is the fifth.
Okay. Speaking of the new book, let's talk a little bit about Sydney's kidney adventure. Her best wish for mom comes true. What was your inspiration to write the book?
Well, it's a really good question. I never thought I'd be writing a children's book, and because my audience has always been adults and some professionals as well, especially when I was in dentistry. But I felt there was a void that needed to be filled. And let me Let me talk a little bit more about that void. Years ago, I had a mentee tell me, gosh, I was helping her through the process of, how can we find a living kidney donor and get her to transplant? And she said, okay, getting this all together, things are working in a positive mode here. But the thing I'm most fretting is how to explain this to my daughter, my little daughter, like 8-year-old daughter. She said, how do I tell her mommy has a kidney disease and needs to get a transplant and is hoping to find a living kidney donor, and I'm going to be out of commission and we won't be able to play in the garden anymore and we won't be able to do this, that, and the other. How do I explain that to my daughter? There's nothing out there like that. So I remembered that seed was planted, and I said, wow, yeah, that's an area that maybe someday I'll work on. But I also found creating a tale about what could be a real life story could be not only inspirational to children, but also to the adult readers, the parent reading to the child, for example. And what I think, honestly, Jim, I have to confess, I wonder if the little girl in the story might have been the little girl I hoped I could have been for my father back in the day. The story is about a little 7-year-old girl who discovers that her mother needs a kidney, needs a transplant, needs a living kidney donor to get that transplant. And for me, and I don't know how it was for you, Jim, but many people that I meet across our path, especially in the PKD community, parents are protecting the kids. Oh, don't tell the kids, don't let especially when pre-existing conditions, right? They can't do anything right now. Don't let them know, why should they worry for 20 years before something may come of it? So I wasn't told anything about my father really, other than he was sick and he had kidney problems. I didn't even know it was genetic when I was as young as little Sydney in the book. And I think, yeah, as I said to you, I think this little girl, I mean, she is called to a higher purpose when she finds out her mommy needs this kidney transplant. And she loves her mommy so much, she just can't imagine that she can't be of help. So she takes it upon herself to be the spokesperson for the family and goes out and spreads the word. And it's the adventure she goes on. I start with her going into a pet store as if she's going to rescue a pet because they had donor days, right, where you can adopt a pet, and she's thinking, oh, I'll go there first. And she starts there, and then she meets up in a bookstore with a living kidney donor who's managing the store, and she continues these adventures and learns a little bit more about how it's important that she gets the story out in the neighborhood, and people are helping her put together signage and posting it, and then she has a lemonade stand, and she's just increasing awareness on her own. And you can imagine, I think, if you and I ever needed another kidney, to have a little cute 7-year-old Sydney saying, my Uncle Jim needs a kidney, I mean, you're going to get more heartstrings plucked on that than an adult talking about their friend. So yeah, I wish I had done more for my dad. I really do. And while I regret the fact that I didn't, I also realize it's important to educate kids. And so I needed to create a book that we could start talking to the little ones about it. So if they feel compelled to say, hey, I'm part of this family and I want to help, maybe they need a little more information than Sydney kind of just took off and ran with it. But it's our responsibility as adults to inform the family, to keep the family bonded, to keep the family supportive of one another.
Okay. I've been scrolling across the screen the book trailer for the book on YouTube, and also where they can purchase the book on Amazon. Can you explain to us how the book is a life lesson in the power of family love and an exploration of living donation for adults and children alike? How are you
Yeah,
appealing to both groups?
thank you for that question. It's a good one because initially when I was writing the book, I was thinking it was going to be more for the child. And while it is still very much for the child, it's for the adult parent. And the reason I say that is that I'm going to take a jump here and say, all right, as patients or as loved ones in a family with someone in need, we have we go through a process where we feel either hopeless and helpless. Let's say we're a loved one for someone in need, or we're the patient on the wait list feeling, especially at some point along the way, if not initially, no one's going to give me one of their kidneys. But, they might have to bump their head on the way home to even think that was something they would want to do. And that's what some living kidney donor families think when they tell them, guess what, I'm donating a kidney. They're like, seriously? So my point here is, as a patient, as we have a little child inside of us too. I think when we get scary diagnoses and or we're on a wait list and we feel like it's a ticking time bomb and we don't know when we're going to get the call, or we don't know what the next move's going to be, that if this little 7-year-old girl could take it upon herself to be a spokesperson for the family and ultimately find her mother a living kidney donor, of course the book has to end on a high, right? That as adults we would be inspired by that, because reading that story, you're just like, wow. And in fact, I've received some wonderful feedback from this book. One individual who read it to their little one, at the end said, oh my gosh, I want to be just like Sydney. I want to be just like Sydney. I want to do what she can do. And so it can inspire the little girl, but also the adult listening or watching the little girl get inspired. And as the story goes on in this book, you'll see that an adult is inspired by another little girl who wants to help Sydney's mother, but is too young to donate. So you'll have to read the book to to get it all, but it is really for both audiences. And I spent a lot of time, Jim, leaving a nephrology group practice, leaving those sacred walls of the exam room, going out to my car and weeping after finding out how my labs were changing or failing. And we need to empower ourselves. I mean, now we have patient portals. We can get our labs, ASAP, and we can get a grip on things before we have our visit. Now, for me anyway, I imagine for you, I'm doing virtual visits as much as I can. But it's not that shock where you come in, you go, okay, let me know the bad news or not, and fretting for weeks and weeks in advance of labs or lab results. So as adults, we need that inspiration. And coming from a child, I think is very sweet, and also very kind-hearted, and it touches our own heartstrings.
How did you envision this book as a way to ease parents into an explanation to children of a loved one's need for a kidney transplant, living kidney donation, and to encourage the family and friends to become living donors?
So
This book.
The first few pages of the book, Sydney notices that her mother's tired all the time, doesn't really feel well, doesn't know what's going on. And Dad comes into her room one night, sits by her bedside, and tells little Cindy what's going on. And for the goal of bringing a family together, what I had mentioned to you earlier, the parents not telling the children what's going on it's really a missed opportunity to gather the family together, to regroup the bond that the family has, or strengthen those strings between, maybe somebody doesn't even live within the household, but keeping things like, oh, I don't want to upset that person, or I don't want to scare the little one. There's a way to describe it in a positive way, because we have options, and transplant is the best option. And it's truly the best option when you can have a living kidney donor and you can get it preemptively. So the whole goal of the book was mom hopefully didn't have to get on dialysis, but could find that living donor to end her wait. And I think if the whole family isn't on the same page, it just, it leaves these voids. I mean, case in point for me, I was not aware. And here as an adult, I look back and I go, darn, I wish I was aware. Because as a young adult, before I was diagnosed, I could have done something. And now I know you and I, Jim, are great examples. What we have done with our lives are great examples. But we didn't know to do that when we were a lot younger. When in those earlier years where we were discovering, and you have some amazing heartfelt stories about your father that I'll never forget. And you, to me, are a hero because you were there with your dad and you were helping your dad. So you don't really fall into the same boat as I do. But I think there's a lot of kids out there that children, maybe adult children, that wish they had known more and wish they had known more about what they could do, because the whole idea of feeling hopeless and helpless can erode the soul. I think we need to find ways, whatever it is, however it is. You don't have to give a kidney, especially when you have a genetic disease. You probably can't. But there are ways to help and support and love the family and be a much stronger unit.
Excellent. Excellent. What's next for Risa Simon and her kidney advocacy? I know you well enough to know that there's always something new in the pipe.
Well, I'm again glad you asked because this is fairly recent. I'm in the midst of launching a new campaign, and it's unique and it's exciting. It's called Extend and Renew Transplant Life. And I'm going to roll that tape back just a little bit to explain what we mean by extend and renew. So imagine, you don't have to imagine it because we're here. Jim, you and I are transplant recipients. We receive this gift, whether it be living or deceased donation. We receive this gift. We're living this new lease on life. Yet you and I know that our transplants are not intended to last forever. There are stats. They show, how many years typically this will last for this person, or this will last if it's deceased or living. And I think, I'll speak for myself, but I spoke to a fair number of recipients so far and living donors, that there's this little voice inside our head. We wake up every day grateful. Don't get me wrong. And I know we're counting all our blessings, no matter what happens, whatever hurdles. And you've had a few, and we know a lot of people have had quite a few in dialysis and transplant. So we don't lose sight of our blessings and our gratitude, but that little voice in our head every now and then pops up, usually right before labs or right before you read your lab results, and go, okay, is it still as good as I hoped it would be? How many years out am I? How many more years, according to these graphs, might this last? And what if I do need another transplant? So while we do everything we can to extend the function of our transplanted kidneys, we also are missing an opportunity of not educating the general public that our transplants are not intended to last forever. Sure, we hope and pray it lasts our entire lifetime, but we may need another transplant for various reasons. But it may have just reached the time. It may have been our immunosuppressive drugs because they're nephrotoxic. I mean, there's so many things, right? But we're missing an opportunity here. And I wanted this campaign to dot an I and cross a T, to allow the general public and people in our inner circle and their inner circle and so on to recognize, because a lot of people, Jim got a transplant 10 years, check the box. He's good. We don't have to worry about Jim, right? Risa got a transplant. She's good. Don't need to worry about her. So as much work as we do to help people get to transplant, to advocate, to empower their path, we also need to open up that window just a little bit every now and then to let individuals know that there's a reality out there that we face, and perhaps people that may have wanted to help you way back when, but couldn't, but think you'll never need help now, would say, wow, I couldn't help Jim way back when, but maybe I could help him in the future if he ever needs another one. And better yet, let me put a comma and not a period after that. Wow, well, I'm healthy. I'm getting older. Maybe I'll just transplant altruistically right now in a voucher program and give a voucher to Jim, and should he ever need one in the future. So I don't have to wait for Jim to need one. And if Jim never needs one, I could list a few people on that voucher program. Maybe Risa will need one before Jim, or whoever it is, and whoever that person is that donates. So that's what I'm on right now. Extend and Renew, where we're doing everything we can to extend the function of our transplanted kidneys, but we're also planting seeds for future needs.
Wow. What a terrific idea. Please keep me posted.
Absolutely. We'll do. We're going to put you in it. We're going to get
All
some
right.
vouchers. We help people. The beauty is
Great.
we help people today. Those people that need kidneys today could be helped by our voucher person, and maybe they're in a paired
Excellent.
chain of 50 people. It's just, it goes on and on.
Just an excellent idea. Terrific. I'm glad you're on it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
We're in the home stretch here, Risa.
Yes.
Do you
We
have
are.
any final statements that you wish to make to our audience before we conclude the broadcast?
Well, yes, I do. I consider myself a preemptive evangelist, and I feel compelled, almost obsessed with helping people, if I catch them in time, to secure a preemptive transplant from a living kidney donor. But maybe somebody's listening that's already on dialysis. Maybe they weren't even sure they wanted to shoot for transplant. Most likely, if they don't have a transplant right now, they're on the wait list. I just want to remind everybody, whether you know someone, a loved one that may need a transplant someday or has kidney disease and you don't know what the future is. But I'll speak to individuals that have kidney disease that are either on the wait list or involved somewhere along their disease continuum, that it is up to us. It's up to us to carve that path to a better and longer life. We are not, this is more of a reminder here, I think, from the broadcast. Initially was talking about how we can't rely on other people 100%. We need them. We need all the clinicians, all the physicians, transplant center, nephrology group practices. We need the LDOs, the dialysis centers, but we need us more. I don't want to say more than anyone, but most importantly, we need us to stand up, to use our voice, to fight for our best life and to secure that best life. And we don't owe it just to ourselves, because we deserve to live the best life, but we owe it to those people within our circle too, whether it be your parents, your spouse, your children. They deserve to have the best part of you. And speaking of that, I'm reminded that there may be some adults or children out there, adult children, that need transplants, that have received offers from family members and were like, oh, no. I'm hardwired to protect my children or protect, my loved ones. I would never let them do this for me. But we fail to keep in mind that the gift is the gift giver's choice, not for us to say we'll take it or not. And it's for the transplant center to decide if that person is going to be put at risk or not, at excessive risk. Of course, there's always a little risk, but we owe it to our loved ones to be the best we can be for them. So if they're going to give their best to us, which may be a kidney, we should accept it. If the transplant center approves them, but then we must take those steps to secure our best life. And it's not a selfish thing. A lot of people, oh, I couldn't do this. It's all about me. I can't put somebody at risk. No, we owe it to our loved ones to create the environment that allows us to get to the finish line and live our best and longest life. You and I, Jim, last thing I'll say here, is when we receive a gift of this magnitude, we want it to count. And this is how I make it count. This is your broadcast, all the stuff you do, all the advocacy, all the committees that you serve on, that I serve. We do this because this is how we make it count. And these patients that are listening tonight, loved ones that are listening tonight, they can make it count. It's their choice. You can sleepwalk your way to dialysis or sleepwalk your way on dialysis for the rest of your life. But if you think you're a transplant candidate, if you think this is a possibility for you, go after that goal. It's worth it.
Wow. Wow. Risa, what a terrific job that you did on the broadcast tonight, right? Raising so much awareness about so many issues and educating all of us. And I've become a big fan of the new book. Am I getting it here?
You are.
All right. So just a great job, and I've kept you for pretty close to an hour. So I have some things I have to button up with our audience. So I'm going to let you go. You're free to go back to your life, and I'm going to tell people who's going to be on next week and do my final bit of overlays, and that'll conclude the broadcast. But I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us and sharing so much of yourself. And you do such a wonderful job. When you get this other thing off the ground, let me know. I'll have you back. We got to talk about this some more. Just a
Thank you
really
so much.
cool thought. And
Love it.
just so people know, Risa and I have been talking about a broadcast where she asked me questions. So
Time
we're
to
going to get
interview
to,
Uncle Jim.
yeah, we're going to get a date together, and she's going to let me prepare some questions, which is always dangerous. And we'll come back, and Risa can ask your Uncle Jim questions. So
That's awesome.
should
Hey,
be
thank
should
you.
be interesting.
Thank you so much for this evening. I appreciate being invited back, and yeah, look forward to your next broadcast and definitely our interview.
Great, great. You have a great evening. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Jim. Likewise. Take care. Be well.
Take care. Bye bye. All right, that concludes our broadcast for the evening. Next week on June 28th, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, Uberti Gonzalez is scheduled to be on the broadcast. She's a mother of a child that is a kidney patient. We're going to talk about uh, pediatric kidney disease and pediatric kidney patients and some of her experiences with that. So watch this space because we're doing a lot of interesting things and I don't want you to miss out. Any rate, I'll see you guys next week. We'll talk soon. You have a good week. Bye bye.